Call the meeting to order. No announcements. Move on to consent agenda. Do we have a press review the previous meeting memorandum? Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
A second. Second. Motion, a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Moving on to item 4 on the consent agenda, fiscal plan discussion presented by Mike Reuter. Mike, welcome.
Okay, Scott, you want to?
Yeah, I'll tee this up. So what a difference a day can make. As many of you are aware, and we've talked about at length, the state of Indiana had put out advice to local governments to forecast at the very least a 10% decrease in your income tax revenue for the upcoming year due to COVID and the pandemic and the ensuing economic downturn. In consulting, Lisa and Mike and I talked, and Hamilton County being distinctly different in some regards, we modified that somewhat where we didn't feel that 10% was probably the appropriate number. We thought it would be less than that, just given the makeup of people who work in Hamilton County. And we've been waiting, as we have told you, that September they were going to release income tax numbers. And this morning, Lisa came running into my office. She had, I think, spilled tea on her way into the office. The numbers came in actually at a roughly 10% rate, not a 10% decline, which there's really two folds to that. One, that's a significant swing in our financial outlook from just the money that would come to the city of Fishers. But keep in mind, we all worked hard. John Weingart and a bunch of us worked to renegotiate our deal at Carmel, where anything above 2.5% growth comes to Fishers, not Carmel. And we were going to lose that year of opportunity here, but in, they were going to see a 9% growth, and now they're going to see a 2.5% growth or something to that effect. And so what Mike's going to go through with you today is that we're a wildly different fiscal plan than what you saw 24 hours ago. And I am not here to make any recommendations on what we do with the additional resources, because we literally found out at 11 o'clock today. So I think it'd be kind of irresponsible to just start throwing ideas out there. But, my team will certainly be in dialogue with the finance chair and things like that. And if we have some recommendations or thoughts going into Monday's council meeting, we'll get those out to the council at the public hearing, and then we'll have 30 days to chew through that. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mike to kind of walk through this.
Okay, so I'm actually going to start with, I'm going to go to local option income tax, but I'm actually going to start with property tax. So for the state of Indiana, for local, not schools, but for local government, cities, towns, counties, townships, libraries, when we go into a recession, we're really kind of slow to feel the effects of the recession, just the way the revenues lag and how they're certified, how we assess property. And so we have some unusual things. I'm going to stand up here by the screen, point to numbers. We have some unusual things happening. I mean, we sense this recession that we're in because we shut the economy down. On the property tax side, things are still relatively stable. And then the local option income tax, as Scott described, has been a wild card. It's always been a wild card for us when we're trying to forecast it, but more so this year than ever before, because we have no history books to follow of what's happening here. Governor Holcomb, in my opinion, said it best when he said, hey, we're going through this the first time together. We've never been in such a strong economy, shut the economy down and went into a pandemic. We've been through a pandemic back in the Spanish flu, but we didn't ever go into a hard shutdown of the economy, complete national shutdown. So just very unusual circumstances. But property tax, your property tax for your operating fund is based on this average of 6 years income. Okay, but it's not looking at the current year income, it's looking at the prior 6 years. So the last known year now is 2019. Okay, so they take 1918 and go back 6 years, and then they come up with this factor. And this would be 4.2% increase. We've just been climbing away from the last recession. So going back to 2013, the income of the state only grew 0.4%. It was a very low year. So that's the first time that year is dropping off. and now we're averaging these much larger numbers. So for the 2021 number, that for your levy is 4.2%. These years are off just the way they get certified. Now, I don't know this to be true, but I thought, well, I'm going to drop a 5% number in there just to see what it does to the future forecast. Okay, I don't know what's happening with the state, and what we received today is somewhat inconsistent with what the state's been saying their income tax numbers have been doing. If you reflect back on April, the state was saying, hey, we're down $1 billion in income tax. And they were assuming 800 million of that was due to the delay of the payment of April 15th to July 15th. So not $1 billion in the sense of total lost revenue, but they were still down a significant amount of revenue. And so your property tax is actually based on the statewide average, no matter where you live in the state, northwest, south, east, west, urban, suburban, doesn't matter the makeup, everybody's based on this factor. Now, there are appeal opportunities, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today too, as it relates to the health fund, the new health fund, and some growth opportunities. But I dropped this in here just to see what would happen, because if you rewound, when we went into the pandemic, I thought, well, I'll go back and look at the Great Recession of 2008 and start applying those assumptions to see what that will do to the model. You know, what will that do to the future out years? And that was a great recession, right? That was pretty deep. But when I go back there and look in 2008, that was a decrease statewide of about 2.9%. Everything I was hearing it was going to be worse than that. Obviously, a lot of people thought that. I mean, if you rewind back to even March, KPMG the large accounting consulting firm, put a report out and said in March and said, hey, you know, the federal government may have to put $1 trillion out, you know, in stimulus money. Literally 1 week later, it was $2 trillion that the government was actually putting out. And so that's how quickly things were changing and how bad things were being perceived. And so I don't know how to project this number because we don't have solid data yet statewide. But I put this in here, but you can see then what happens because you're averaging something with 5 good years and 1 bad year. It doesn't drop off the table. Okay, so now that's just the base. Now, as I mentioned, there are appeal opportunities. At least if you would go to the next page. Actually, the page before, I believe, the assessed valuation page. One more. Okay, so the assessed valuation plays into it as well for growth. It was called a growth factor appeal. And so you've been experiencing some nice growth in AV. I mean, we have a large tax base, but it's been pretty strong growth. Now, this is a real number now, too, for your budget. So 4.6%, it's a little less than the year before at 5.5 and 5.3. But if your previous 3 years average is greater than that 6-year non-farm personal income factor, you can appeal that difference. If your assessed valuation is growing faster than 2% of the state assessed valuation, which yours is. And so farm ground's been going down across the state, so that's been dragging down the state some. But my point being is, so we can almost be off on that 6-year non-farm personal income factor because it would just make your appeal larger, right? So if I use a 10% decrease, your growth is strong enough in assessed valuation that you'll continue to appeal for the difference. So that's good news, right? It's kind of my message about slow to feel the effects of the recession, you know, especially on the property tax side. And so I'm even projecting, I mean, this is, I think, even conservative here in 22. Because if we get to January of 21 this year, that'll set 22's assessed valuation. And right now, things have been really strong. Some of you know Brian Ayer at Ayers in Noblesville, the city council member in Noblesville, and I was talking to him, and he's a realtor in Noblesville, and I said, so Brian, what are you seeing? You know, what are you seeing in Noblesville? And he said, well, back to give you some idea, back in 2008, he goes, we had 700 to 800 homes on the market. Today we have 85 homes on the market. The real estate market's just been so strong yet, even through this COVID event, which early on I thought, oh my goodness, you know, what's going to happen to real estate values? But with the low interest rates and the people have jobs, they're buying homes. And So even here, Scott and I've talked, the new housing market hasn't been impacted much. So positive trending meaning when we were certifying the assessed valuation, home values have been increasing. Now, you get out past 22, I get a little more nervous because will it turn from a seller's market to a buyer's market? There are a lot of people, maybe not so much here, but there are a lot of people in the entertainment industry that are still hurting. And, the moratorium on mortgages is gone right now, rental, all that stuff. Will that start to impact future assessments? I don't know. But right now, I'm actually feeling pretty good through 2022. I can't imagine it's going to take that hard a return between now and January that we wouldn't see some growth yet in 22. So anyway, I'm not getting real aggressive with this assumption. But what that means, Lisa, if you go pages, just past that non-farm personal income factor. Right here, this is the actual calculation. You might have to shrink it a little bit, Lisa. Thank you for driving, by the way.
No problem. That's good.
One more page, please.
I'll write it down, yeah.
The other way, I'm sorry.
There you go.
There we go. So your maximum levy, you saw that factor, the 6-year non-farm personal income factor, is simply your prior year maximum levy times that factor and becomes a loop. And so we've not been in an appeal situation. We've not been growing. The assessed value, our assessed valuation was not exceeding that, so we've not had the growth appeal opportunity. There's something new this year in 21 that we're going to be appealing, not the growth factor, because 4.2% is higher than our assessed valuation growth. There's not an opportunity there. But we are going to be appealing the new health fund. And so Scott and Lisa and I and Chris had a really good conference call the other day with the Department of Local Government Finance in preparation of our request to increase our levy for the health fund. Now that's really kind of a trade, right? So what's going to happen is we will file for an extension of services appeal. That's clearly a new service the city is offering that was not there before. And so we will appeal the levy. Okay, this is just the property tax portion. This isn't the miscellaneous revenue that we're going to get, and I'll show you all that later. But we're going to appeal this, which is about $700,000. That will become part of our permanent base going forward, and will grow then based on our growth of the AB. So you'll continue to receive some increase on that. We had a very positive meeting with them. As we talked through what was going on and how this occurred. So what's going to happen at the county level now, they're going to have different assessments, 2 different assessed valuations. They're going to have one for the county for all their other funds, but for their health fund, they're going to have a much lower one. They'll have like a $17 billion AB. It won't include Fishers. And that tax rate the county tax rate for the health fund won't apply to anyone in Fishers. This one will. And this represents 1 cent, okay, on the tax rate. Exactly 1 cent. So,
Mike, real quick, let me interrupt. When you were talking about the county portion, is that, that's not an option, right? They have to pull that back?
so they cannot levy that tax on the Fishers resident because you guys have a health fund.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So they actually they can still levy because their health fund is part of their maximum levy. And so they're not losing their maximum levy. And so that's up to them, right, what they do with that. So right now it looks like they're going to maintain where they were, in terms of budget, and yet to be determined on the tax rate what they will have. We'll see at the end of the day where that ends up. I think it'll be slightly higher than a penny. My personal opinion, I think it'll be slightly higher. We'll see. So anyway, that becomes part of your permanent maximum levy. You'll get some excise tax off of that. It pulls excise tax with it, pulls CVIT, commercial vehicle excise tax. And so I'll show you all that in a minute too. But you see, this number hasn't been there for a while. We used to do this years ago. We always appealed the growth factor. But that's popping back up because if I use that lower growth quotient on the non-farm personal income factor, it kicks us back into the growth appeal. So property tax still remaining pretty stable for the most part. Assessed valuations remaining pretty stable. So Okay, so let's go to lit. I'm gonna go to page 51. So this was the wild card that we received literally this morning. So part of the COVID event, when the governor delayed the income taxes from April 15th to July 15th, that was gonna be a problem for us, because it was moving the collections out beyond the certification period for our 2021 distribution. And so that happened, and then the state realized that, and they went, okay, we didn't intend to hurt the 21 budget. This was really just meant for a delay. So we have a couple of columns here. This first column, this collection column, is a calendar year number, okay? And this is how we reconcile every year, because we collect income tax based on what people file in their returns. You know, the final return decides how much we collect. The last known year is 2018. This number I actually had. So that was up 71%. I'm actually, and we had already talked about this, I was still forecasting that to 2019, because remember, it's a calendar year, 2019, I was still forecasting that would go up 6%. Because it's calendar year 2019, it wasn't, people paid less for 2019, they just got delayed when they got to pay it. So that's still a strong number. If this is true, and I think it will be, now Scott, this came down a little bit because our distribution came in higher. If it comes in, we're going to get a special distribution in 21 that's probably going to be larger than what we received in 2020. So that's, again, going back to my comment, slow to come into the effects of a recession, slow to come out. Keep that in mind too, right? We're slow to come in, but we'll also be slow to come out of the recession. That's what we've been climbing out of. So I'm actually forecasting a stronger special distribution in 21. And how they determine that is they look at what you actually collected with how much they distributed that year. And so if they just didn't distribute enough, then, and if this balance exceeds 15%, then they kick that money back out in the form of special distribution. And up until this year, this COVID event thing, I thought, well, this is going to be a reoccurring thing. We're always going to see this. So again, I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, how do we forecast what we're going to get in 21? Well, this column is different than the collections column. The distribution column is on a fiscal year, okay? So what they do here is they look for 21. They were supposed to take what was collected from July 1, 2019 through June 30th, 2020. And that becomes the distribution. Well, had they not accounted for those collections that came in after July 15th, that would have been bad. You know, we would have gotten that in our 21 distribution. So this is the number that Scott mentioned. We were carrying a negative 1.8% there. And the reason being is during that period, it wasn't all bad. You know, from July 1, 19 until into February, maybe into March, things are still pretty good. The last 4 months of the, you know, that fiscal year, you know, the brakes were slammed on. And so it's like, well, we're probably going from a 6% growth down to maybe negative. As Scott mentioned, the state, for budget purposes, was saying, hey, you know, we're going to use 10%. We don't know where to start with this. And it would vary across the state, right? What happened in Elkhart, Indiana, wouldn't be the same as what happened in Hamilton County, Indiana. These are county numbers, not state numbers. You know, Elkhart County shuts the lines down. People were unemployed. In Hamilton County, a lot of people were able to go home and work from home. You know, so it was just, you know, the makeup's different across the state. So the bottom line is this came in at 10.8%, which was huge, especially this year, because House Enrolled Act 1113 was the bill that was passed to reallocate between Carmel and Fishers. The proportions had gotten significantly different between the two communities. And it's real easy and clear in my mind. It was easy to determine 2021 because really anything over 2.5% they were going to get, it would go this way. But if your distribution would have went down 1.8%, there'd been nothing to give because their distribution would have went down too. But instead, we got this number, and this number made a difference. I got the formula, I got the numbers from the DLGF. So it's $4,705,946.
That's coming from Carmel to Fisher.
That's coming from Carmel to Fishers. Had that not happened, Carmel's distribution would have been $49,325,000. Fishers would have been $25,891,000. So we would have been about half of what Carmel's distribution is. And of course, that was our argument when we were, seeking our special legislation, is like, hey, we have the same amount of population as Carmel. When you look at income at the federal government level, yeah, we might make a little less, but not 50% less. And so we appealed to not hold them down completely, but, hold them down so we can catch up. And so that happened. So the swing went from 49 million to their 44,619,000, and we're at 30,597,000. So instead of there being almost a $24 million difference, there's a $14 million difference. That's a pretty significant swing. Now, I'm on the calendar for the DLGF tomorrow. I need to understand their interpretation for 22. So I don't want today, when we look at the fiscal plan, no commitments on 22 yet, right? Because I don't know what this number is going to be. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute. And I need to confirm with them, because I've seen their spreadsheet, what their interpretation is for the next year. Will they start 44 million and the 30? Or will they start with the 49 million and the 25 million? Which numbers are they going to start with when they make their calculation for 22? I think it should be the base.
Yeah, you reset, the whole intent was to reset the base,
Yeah.
not one time.
Right,
Allow
getting this
that.
caught up.
Right.
But I want to confirm that,
Yeah.
right? So because sometimes just a word or two can make a big difference.
Yeah.
And so I want to pin that down before I commit to that future number. Now, I don't know. I mean, I'm way off now because I wouldn't have guessed that. I don't know that anybody would have guessed a 10.8% increase when the year before we grew 8.6, and the year before we grew 2%. Now, we didn't believe the 2%, to be honest.
Right.
We went down to the state and talked to them like, how can this be? Countywide, Hamilton County, 2000, fiscal year, that would have been the prior fiscal year. How could it have only been 2% increase? So in my mind, that should have been a lot higher. In my mind, that should have probably been something less than that. I don't know the exact number. But I can tell you that the state, which is another issue, has been tracking the collections. I've lived through 3 pretty significant errors over the years in this calculation. There was one in 99 that I lived in, and then the county actually just passed that a couple of years later. We actually sued the state. You guys remember, some of you would remember that we actually sued the state because the collection number did not reflect what we believed was happening. And lo and behold, it jumped 17%. And then we had an error in 2012 that all got everything recalculated. So I'm just being cautious with this because we need more information on 2022 before we get to committing future dollars beyond 21. I'm puzzled by that. Now, I do think it's going to resume. I think it's going to go back. But how I got this number, the 7.55, is looking back at 2009, 8, and 9. 2008 and 9, remember that recession fell over 2 calendar years. It fell on the end of 08 and then 09. And so with that number, just to say, well, if it's similar to the Great Recession, that would be the number. Could be worse, we're not through this yet, right? So Hamilton County seems to be doing pretty good in terms of being open. But, we're not to the vaccine yet. So Bottom line is, boy, we got some really big news today. That was a game changer in terms of, it's even higher than the one I showed you today, because we got this number this morning. They were supposed to certify that by September 15th. The number I literally got less than 2 hours ago before I walked in here was the actual amount for Fishers and the actual amount for Carmel. Before, I only had the total. And by fluke, this is by fluke, Carmel's home place annexation took effect as well, okay? So, LIT, local option income, based on your prior year tax levy and your prior year distribution, less any new debt issued after July 1, 2005. That's the formula for it. Well, they appealed their levy, in which, when we did the Geist annexation, we did a big appeal as well. They appealed their levy and got their levy up. That's what was causing some of that bigger bump, if you were honest. So it would have been a tough year for us had the collections gone down. They still wouldn't have hit the 2%, 2.5%, and we wouldn't have gotten this correction. So
I think one thing to emphasize too here, Mike, is we only had a 3-year window for this 2.5% deal with Carmel. And one of the concerns we had was we were going to go through a 2-year recovery period where that income tax was below 2.5%. We probably were looking at that whole legislative initiative not resulting in any new revenue. So this is an especially important turn of events.
it was. As I said, we were pleasantly surprised to get that number today. So with that said, what your general fund looks like now, if you would, Lisa, go to page 1.
Let me make that bigger, don't I?
Yeah.
Is that better?
Yeah, thank you. So this is probably as I said, let's not make judgment on 22 yet, but this is the number. It's actually higher than this now. This was when I just had the total. I didn't have the home place impact of everything in there. This is actually about $600,000-$700,000 higher yet than this. So this line represents excess deficit revenues over expenditures. Tells you whether your budget's in or out of balance. And so we've been in balance. At least if you'd scroll down just a little bit, please. So this is the 21 column.
Mm-hmm.
So so we're in balance right now with this number, 7.2 million. It's a little bit higher than that now, closer to the $8 million number, which is just a huge swing, and it's all here. We've gone from a pretty short period of time of 21 million to $29 million. And so again, going back to that comment, here we are in this perceived recession, yet these revenues are coming, but caution, because just like we were coming out of the last recession, we were still living with some lingering effects even up until this year. Because when you average something 6 years, it takes you 6 years to get out of the formula. So just kind of keep that all in mind. Let's see, Lisa, I'm going to stop on the.
I think there's a couple of things to emphasize here, Mike, because people can take this information and run. The 22 and 23 where it shows a deficit, you haven't done anything to the revenue numbers there to contemplate. You haven't begun to forecast what 2022 and 2023 will look like. Right. Based on the information that we got today.
It came in so quick today, I couldn't get it, and I need that point of clarification with the DLGF more. And he sent me the spreadsheet for the calculation. The first number I got was a countywide number.
Yeah.
Then I got the distribution by unit. There's no calculation to show how they got to that. I got that, and that's how I wrote those numbers down. Is I got a spreadsheet now to go so I can reconstruct that.
Yeah.
And then reconstruct what 22 and 23 look like.
Right.
But then layer in is which base are you using?
Right.
Confirming which base are you using. So yes, please give me time on this. I think maybe I'll know tomorrow morning, when I talk to Fred.
I think what's safe to say trajectory-wise, those two numbers improve. I mean,
Yeah.
there's not a scenario where that gets worse.
No,
That gets significantly better, if anything.
no. This includes the negative decrease in
Yeah,
local
right.
option income tax.
Right,
Maybe that doesn't happen either, right?
Right.
I mean, if
Right.
that doesn't happen, we get another 10%.
yeah,
That's
Yeah.
a huge swing. Lead has always been a wild card for us. It's just always been a wild card. It's been hard to pin down. So, to be real frank, this information is just inconsistent with what the state's been saying about in schools, what schools are thinking. You know, it's what schools are hearing in terms of their budgets for next year, in the long session. The state lives on income tax, sales tax, corporate income taxes, and gambling. Gambling taxes, those road taxes, you know, for a period there, those got hit pretty darn hard. But you're on property tax and lit, property tax stable, lit, more of a wild card. But Scott, I'm gonna talk about the health fund and all.
yeah, I think it's really important, because I don't want any misinformation out there, and this is something new. And certainly don't want, miscommunication out in the community about the implications of this health department 1 cent. So, Mike, if you can really talk through the mechanics of that.
Absolutely.
Because I know you do work for both the county and the city, so you have a unique insight into how
Yeah,
this is gonna
so-
work.
So, yeah, Lisa, we're gonna go to page, go to the health fund on page 17.
So this is new, for us. Now, as you know, you put $2 million in here to get the department started. That was appropriated. You'll probably recover the majority of this through the CARES Act money. Maybe not all of it, but most of it will be recovered through the CARES Act money. That's how we plan to repay the general fund, is with those dollars, because the dollars that we moved here from the general fund will get moved back to the general fund. And so, the impact of 2020 won't be $2 million on your budget, is my point. In 2021, let's say we have a beginning balance of 0. This is that $698,000 I told you about. That was that deal. That's the 1 cent. We're gonna lose some of that to the circuit breaker, because it's not exempt from the circuit breaker. We'll get some excise tax, and we'll get a little bit of CVIT, and we'll get about $250,000 of receipts off of the new permits that were going to the county. County's revenue will go down $250,000, our revenue will go up $250,000. So our revenue is about $944,000 when you combine all that. Our budget's $898, so we're in balance by $46,000. That'll give you a little bit of a cash balance to start the year, the next year. Not a huge cash balance. It'd be nice to kind of keep building that up till we got a little closer to half of our property tax distribution. But it is new. I do feel good about the extension of services appeal based on our conversation. We're gonna have to go through some hoops to do that. But so the county's rate will go down essentially a penny. The city's rate will go up a penny. There is no rate impact on the taxpayer. So, your assessed valuation is not changing. You're simply taking that penny and collecting it here and collecting it locally, and it won't go to the county. The county will levy their own health fund rate. As I said, their assessed valuation, much like a township, has 2 assessed valuations. They have one for the whole township, and they have one for the unincorporated area. Well, the county kind of has that same scenario now. They've got one for the county for all their other funds, and then they've got one for the health fund. And so the Fishers resident won't pay that county rate, they'll pay the Fishers rate. And so when you look at tax rates, Lisa, if you would go to the tax rate page. On page 33.
Get a little bigger for you.
So for 21, we have a 1 cent increase, which is the health fund. But the county's rate's gonna go down 1 cent, that the residents of Fishers won't be paying. So this has the same impact of no rate increase, if that makes sense. So it's a trade where they're paying it. Versus sending the penny to the county, that penny's gonna get sent here. But we've got to go through the budgeting process to do that. We'll set up a separate fund. You'll be able to track those expenses and the revenue forward. And going forward, you get to determine, that becomes part of your maximum levy, and you get to determine each year how much you want to allocate to the health fund. It'd be, because the general fund is part of your maximum levy too, so you can allocate more, you can allocate less, once you get it in there, once you get the appeal. So,
Mike and Delmar and Fall Creek, there's probably a small amount that are unincorporated, so you'll remember, or you will remember during the guys standing station, we kind of had to watch that just to make sure that if you're in Fall Creek, you know whether you're in or out,
Yeah.
whether that person gets captured or not captured.
the
I'm just
county,
trying to think through.
the county will take care of all that in their tax bill. They have taxing district numbers, and they'll apply the taxing district numbers, and there's a rate chart. And so when you go to the unincorporated Delaware, they'll see a county rate there,
Okay.
and they won't see a Fisher's Health rate. You go to Delaware Fishers, you're gonna see no county rate, you're gonna see a Fisher's rate. So, they prepare. That's nothing that would have to be done at this level.
Did I understand you earlier in that you said that the county may be increasing that health tax a little bit?
Well, so they have a maximum levy, like you have a maximum levy, and they can decide whether they want to put more into the health fund or less in the health fund. Right now, they haven't approved their budget, so they haven't approved it yet. We don't know exactly where they're gonna land. But right now, that budget hasn't been cut back. So they've decided to keep that amount. And so they might see their rate increase slightly on the unincorporated area, but it's only because they're committing more of their general fund dollars. You follow me on that? So they're still collecting the same amount of tax, but now they're allocating some more to the health fund.
Okay.
I think it's important to note that whatever they do regarding that rate has no impact on the Fishers resident.
Yes. And now you are, as a municipality, limited to a cent, 1 penny. So it won't be more than a penny here. The code describes that. So, the good news also about that is, because that does become part of your maximum levy, that helps your levy, or your calculation of lit. The bad news is we have some old debt, that 2005, that's rolling down. And it's not quite the same, it's not a complete offset, meaning we're dropping that levy of those old debt funds. Remember, the formula is prior year levy, prior year distribution, less any new debt after July 105. Well, all that old debt prior to 05, you're getting the benefit of that in the lit calculation, but you don't have much left there. You got about another $1 million that's gonna roll off over time out of there, and that'll be out of the calculation. It will be for all units. The library, Hamilton East is going through that right now. Their debt is rolling off, the new one's coming on, they're not gonna get the lit benefit from that.
So it's, it was one of those perverse incentives prior to 2005 that if you borrowed more money, you got more income tax revenue. And, we were fairly conservative in that regard, and that's part of how Carmel and Fishers got out of whack. I think it is important to know in these tax rates that they contemplate any bond issuance or tax rate implication of bond issuances through 2023. And part of the reason that we looked at Geis Waterfront Park and we looked at the second funding for State Road 37 would be rolled on in 2024 in acknowledgement of the fact that we have debt rolling off. Now what would allow us, as we talked at one of our finance committees, I think probably 2 months ago, about our strategies around those two projects, was the idea that to keep it a tax neutral or, not on our residents, we wanted to make sure that we followed when the debt came off. And we have some pretty significant bonds rolling off in 2024, significant debt.
Yeah, that's in the fiscal plan. If you have a copy of it, it's actually on page, glasses are fogging up, page 60, I can't see it, 69? I believe it's page 69. You'd see all the debt of the different debt funds that you have. So we have this old debt fund, anything prior to July 105. And the reason there's more, there were also legislative changes that affected operating balances. So we had this old debt fund pre-05, you had a new debt fund after '05 that was entitled to a 50% cash balance. In other words, whatever your budget was, you could collect 50% more. Then it rolled down to 15%, then we created another new debt fund that only allows 15%, so that's why you have multiple debt funds. Eventually, those two funds will go away, the fund will go away, and also the debt fund that's from July 1, '05 to July 1 of 14. So any debt between that period is entitled to a 50% cash balance. Anything after July 1, 14 is entitled to a 15% cash balance. So that's why you would see different debt funds and why we track it that way, because there's different limitations within the big jigsaw. Anything else, Scott, you want me to touch on? I didn't.
I think maybe if we could just go back to the general fund page, Lisa, I think to kind of summarize all that. Because when Mike and Lisa get excited talking about, you know, these fiscal plans, it can get complex. You know, the basics of this that we just need to contemplate where we sit today is, you know, Lisa, great job working with our department heads. We came to you with a balanced budget. In fact, I think we're to the positive, like $600,000-700,000. We were trying to build cash into that bottom line because we thought, you know, Armageddon. So we were thinking, boy, we really need to continue to build our surplus. So if this number's a positive, then your bottom cash is typically going to build, less encumbrances or anything like that. So when I tell the team inside the halls of City Hall here, I always worry about this number. So when I look at Mike's fiscal plan, the first thing I always do is go right over here because I'm thinking, all assumptions aside, after 3 years of providing services and investing in our community, where are we going to be with our cash? And this was looking much more bleak as we were coming into these conversations with you before. So, you know, Lisa and I, there were no additional staff involved. There were no additional compensation for our employees. You know, travel and training had been slashed significantly. There just wasn't a lot in this budget because we wanted to make sure, you know, Lisa was good enough to champion our story and got us a AAA bond rating in the last bond issuance. That's because of focusing on making sure we hit these numbers. This morning, flipped everything on its head when these numbers came out, and we are significantly better off. And so, you know, right now you're sitting at a $7.2 million positive surplus. We felt really good about putting $700,000 to the bottom line of our cash. And this number is actually higher, it's 7.8 probably. So you're looking at about a $7 million surplus at this point in the general fund. Now, to Mike's point, and I think Lisa would echo this as well, I don't think that's a license for us to go spend every dollar of that $7 million because it's, you know, payday. Because just as crazy as this projection came out today, to predict what next year's income tax is going to be, you know, who knows? This year, we have to wait and see what that does.
A new computer system is great. The system was very antiquated we were using. The new computer system could produce a different result that we didn't intend, right? They may find out, well, their old method was not right, and they need to capture some back. Go back to that lit page, because I can show you a year when they made about a 20% cut on us when they thought they made a mistake, and it was harsh. Page 51, I think, Lisa. You're not unique in how you approach this budget. Everybody was doing that. I mean, even though people had a little bit of cash in 21, everybody was starting to preserve for 22 because they foresee what was going to come with that. I do have a couple other counties to share with you. Johnson County was up 6%. Hancock County was up 6%. So those are
that's encouraging from the sense of we're not some sort of outlier.
Yeah, so Hamilton County is not an outlier.
Right.
So if there's a problem, it'd be a problem statewide. But look here. You know, these were the bad years. They thought they over-distributed to us. You know, they had 30%. You know, these wild swings in distributions. And so, yeah, 10% is great, but what would happen if we got a negative 17% of craziness. I don't know what that would be. I would hope that's not true, you know? You try to apply reasonable assumptions to these things, but we've lived through it, you know? And you just have to be cautious about it, because those are tough years.
So there's a couple of really important points that we need to just do some more homework on. One was Mike's point about whether this new money from Carmel goes to our base, because that will predict future revenue streams and will be very, very important. So getting clarification on that will help drive those next 2 years in the fiscal plan. And hopefully you get some information on that. And then, to be honest with you, I mean, we don't even have the most up-to-date numbers. So Lisa and I were not coming here today with some sort of plan for these revenues. You know, I think what we would ask is, you know, give us the rest of the week and into the weekend. And then the good news is the public hearing is just the beginning of it's the public conversation about the budget. We have 30 days past that to continue to fine tune the budget. And so my goal for the upcoming budget would be for Monday is to present the budget and then probably a series of recommendations from staff about, hey, here's some other things that we could look at investing. And then we still have 30 days of other finance committee meetings and things like that we can go back and chew through. But this is, you know, this is good news. We just haven't had time to really digest it or process it at this point.
Mike, how soon will you know, and how soon can you update the?
Yeah, so I actually have a meeting at 7:30 a.m. With the DLGF person tomorrow morning. I mean, as soon as I got this, and he was gonna have to give me the spreadsheet right away this afternoon, so I'm gonna be updating that spreadsheet, but then I'm gonna be talking to him tomorrow morning about base. Fred, what is your interpretation of base going forward? It's very easy to see in a spreadsheet. It's exactly like we thought it was gonna happen. They ran the calculation like they always do, you know, and they ran how much Carmel should have gotten. They ran how much we should have gotten. Then they went into Carmel's. If it's anything over 2.5%, it comes to Fishers. Pretty simple math. But now, going next year, are they going to use the old base in that formula? Or are they going to adjust it and say, all right, Fisher's beginning point is here now, and Carmel's point is here, and then we're gonna run the formula. That's what we want. That's what we want to happen, making sure the code is consistent with their interpretation. And that's a big swing. I mean, that's a $5 million a year swing.
So I don't have anything else, John, other than this. This is plenty for one day, but it was timely to be able to have this meeting and provide this update.
The good news is we weren't even supposed to have that individual unit number until September 30th. To get it today was a bonus.
Well, I think Counselor's been with us before. We've been in meetings where it's gone the other way and had to have readjust everything. It's nice to.
Because I've been here since.
Yeah, you've seen a lot, David.
2003, and I mean, I vividly remember
There's a 21% decrease.
and then that 30% was like, what the hell? It was
Yeah.
like you
Was the air.
browbeat them, and then they changed it.
Yeah, it was the air.
That was just weird.
And then the 2012 was like the day before the budget or something. They came back and
Yeah.
whacked us like $2 million we had to find.
Yeah,
Fun times.
so yeah, we've lived through some of those swings. I hope that happen. That's the whole idea behind a new system. It's,
Behind our cash reserve policy, you know, so that if this happens, we.
absolutely.
Okay, Mike,
My pleasure.
do we need to, is the request to approve the excess levy still going to be in the council agenda Monday evening? Do we need to make a recommend?
We would ask that
So
you.
we'd ask that, yeah.
Do you have a motion to recommend approval of this?
So moved.
I have a motion by Swin,
Second?
second by Cecilia. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Moving on to resolutions. Resolution of the Common Council authorizing transfer of interest in real estate to the Fisheries Redevelopment Authority.
This is a procedural step related to the permanent financing for the transportation bond. And as part of that, it's a lease agreement, so we just have to transfer property from one entity to the other. So the procedural step to and make that happen.
I should have a motion to recommend approval of that. I'll make a motion. Do I have a second? Second, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Moving on to the budget, first reading.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think, you know, under a normal situation, I would ask for a request to approve the budget, for into the public hearing, but honestly, today is just, it's one of these odd situations where you have a fundamental change in the environment, so I think it would be probably disingenuous for me to ask you for an approval of something that's going to change dramatically in the next 72 hours. And so, really what I think the public hearing will be is just bringing those recommendations forward to the council for consideration. And then we'll really probably come back to this conversation over the next 30 days and bring it back for final approval at the budget. So I'd prefer, John, I don't ask that you forward the budget then.
Because it's not, it's so
I'm
fundamental,
not gonna first reading something I haven't seen.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be fundamentally different on that, so. On that. Were there any other budget questions that I think for you guys that we,
Mike, you do work for Hamilton County, is that correct?
Yes,
What's their tax rate gonna be for 2021?
it's going to decrease slightly.
So no tax increase in the county rate to residents?
No, and, so, I'm in the school, I've talked to the school there, they should have a slight decrease.
Okay.
And so, overall, I don't see, the library shouldn't be seeing increases, so I think you should see it pretty flat, if not slightly lower tax rate in 2020. Now, again, everybody's just in their public hearings and adoption, so I can't commit to any of those, just sharing with you.
Well, and the other part about this that's always hard is in this real estate market that has been strong, I oftentimes have residents complain about, their taxes going up, and I have to remind, your tax rate might not have gone up, but your assessed value in your home went up fairly significantly, and that's really, so it's always hard when you tell people like, hey, your tax rate's not going up, so they assume that their tax bill is gonna be exactly the same. Well, we don't control their assessment, so you don't know if it could have just as well gone up.
Not everybody does go up.
Right.
You know, the trending, if you have a neighborhood that's selling quick, it's trending up. If you have a neighborhood that's going down, they may actually go down. I've had a couple of
Yeah.
my assessments go down. You don't want that to happen. That's not what you want to happen, but, it does happen.
Yeah.
Any other unfinished or new business? I do have, looks like there was a public request I saw, just got it right before the meeting.
Yeah.
On the health department, and it looks like we've right-sized the health department as being a balanced budget, actually
Yeah.
in surplus.
right, yeah,
Another one regarding the trail, what we spent on the trail.
and things like that, and that was related to the bond and
Yeah.
that, and we have, we'll probably discuss that a little
Just
bit
wanna
more.
make sure we note that.
Yeah.
Anything else? I'll,
Looking through my notes, it's probably the exact same thing, Scott, that you're gonna go through, I was just gonna try to scrub them tonight, different things, but with these new numbers, you're probably gonna do the same thing, like how much tuition reimbursement, all the different things that we went through in the last meeting.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's just one item, but I'm sure you're gonna
Yeah.
scrub all those different things.
Yeah, I'm gonna come back with a series of detailed recommendations on personnel and all that kind of stuff. It was pretty easy for Lisa and I, well, it wasn't easy because it's hard on our employees, but from summarizing, it's like, no new people, no new raises, no, you know. Now we're in a little different category. And so, believe me, when I told the department heads today, I was like, easy here, guys. We'll work through this, but yeah, we got a busy 4 or 5 days ahead of us.
motion to adjourn. And second.
Okay.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you all very much. Have a great rest of the week.